And this is, pause for dramatic
A
effect.
person that drinks water, Noi.
This is Noi. We're here today to talk about Israel. Who here has heard about Israel? Anybody? Okay, great. What are some things you know about Israel? Just shout it out. No hand raising here. What do you know about Israel? Hanukkah.
It's a place.
It's a place. It's a place where they celebrate Hanukkah. This is all correct so far. Anybody else? It's a place in the Middle East.
There's people.
4.0 student. There's people. It's a place in the Middle East. Who lives in Israel? What type of people live in Israel? What do we know?
People.
Jews. Jewish people. And Arabs. Jews and Arabs. There's some other groups we'll get into. What else do we know? What else do we know about Israel? Yes. One of the freest. I like this. One of the freest nations. This is correct. What else do we know?
King David.
King David. A+. Somebody was paying attention in Sunday school. Okay. Yes? Jesus of Nazareth. Yes. Used to live in what is now Israel. Okay, a couple more. Then we'll move on. Over here, this table. What do we know about Israel? What did we heard? Is that where is east? In this room. Somebody. Who knows east? It's a that way. Okay, last person. What do you really leave us on a strong note with Israel? Yes.
Israel sits on the bridge between Africa, like northern Africa, as well as the Middle East in that era.
That's perfect. It's the connecting point between North Africa and the Middle East. If you're British, you'll call it the Near East. It's pretty cool. Okay, so we know some good things about Israel so far. Do you want to sort of like take it away?
Yeah, I'll see. Okay, hi everybody. Good morning. So many of you.
I know. What is this?
Okay, so I'm going to talk with you a little bit in depth about Israel, and we're going to unpack some facts that not many people know about Israel. You might have heard some things in the news, or from your friends, or from your parents, or from a family member, or from a teacher, but we're going to go really in depth and explore this amazing country with the conflicts that she's facing today. Do you want to have a seat, maybe?
There's not enough chairs.
No chairs? How about the floor? Or maybe here, on this little carpet thing? No?
Yes, there's
Because it's going to be long, and you're going to be exhausted by the end of it.
You guys can sit on the floor and
Everybody can get on the floor.
Can you guys sit on your backpack so it doesn't hurt?
It's okay. Just make yourself comfortable, because it's going to be a long ride.
Hey guys, not the table because people behind you can't see.
Oh, right.
Okay.
We really need you to sit. Okay, try
Yeah,
to
it's
sit.
for you. It's for you guys. I'm going to stand for the next hour. Okay, so first let me introduce myself. My name is Noi, and this is John Michael. We work for Stand With Us. Stand With Us is a non-profit and non-political organization that is dedicated to fight anti-Semitism. Do you know what anti-Semitism is? Yes?
I forgot.
Oh, nice job, Hunter.
Hey!
All right, yeah, over there.
It's prejudice against Jewish people.
Right, it's prejudice against Jewish people. Maybe. Yeah, you have. Okay. And also dedicated to teach about Israel. So let me tell you a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Israel about 36 years ago. Just like you, I grew up in a suburban city and went to school and had fun with my friend and just did like normal things, go to movies, all that. The only difference is that when I was 18, I was drafted into the army, because when you live in Israel and you turn 18, you've been drafted to the army. Women serve for 2 years, at least. Men serve for 3 years. And since I went on and became an officer, I served another year. If you have any questions about my military service or would like to talk about it some more, or ask me any questions, so feel free. We'll have some more time at the end. So that's it. After I was released from the military, I went to the university and I studied political science and communication, and I started working in marketing. And fast forward, about 6 years ago, I moved with my family to the United States. I've lived in North Carolina, I've lived in California, And now I live in Redmond, Washington, next to Seattle, not far from Seattle. And that's pretty much it. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about myself as we go further along. So what I'm going to talk to you today is like a brief introduction to Israel. In order to understand what's going on right now in Israel, we need to take a step back and we need to kind of have the broader context of the events that led up to what we are seeing today. So let's dive right in. Have you ever heard anything about Israel and the conflicts that she's facing? Anything about terror organizations? Anything of that kind? Yes? No? No? Huh? Huh? Yeah?
No, I
Okay.
went behind you.
Yeah. Sorry.
I know that there is kind of conflict in Israel. I don't know exactly what it is. I've just like kind of heard of it. I can't really tell you any more than that.
Okay. Yes.
I think, yeah, Palestine is fighting for the independence right now.
All right. So there is not a state called Palestine. There are people that are called Palestinians, right? And they live in areas that are not inside Israel. They live under the Palestinian Authority, but they are fighting for their independence. But it's a struggle right now because today there is only one state that's called Israel, right? And we'll unpack that. We'll get to that. Okay. So when we're talking about Israel, Israel has an amazing story, right? A story about resilience, a story about an ongoing 3,000 years connection to that little piece of land, how we've been kicked out of it, and then we were able to come back and rebuild it and make it such a vibrant and amazing democracy, very liberal place. The only democracy in the Middle East today, basically. It's a story about indigenous people, the Jewish people that came from Judea, from this land, about 3,000 years ago, and maintain an ongoing connection with this land for 3,000 years. It's a story about us being kicked out of this land. We've been conquered and we've been sent out to the diaspora. We've been scattered all over the world, and we're going to talk a little bit about how it was and how was this experience for us, and how it got really, really worse, especially in Europe, when it got to a genocide and 6 million Jews were massacred. And last but not least, the story of liberation on how we came back and we were able to reestablish this amazing country. So, we're going to talk also about the conflict. What is it about? Is it about ideology, about religion, about land, maybe all of the above? And you have some questions and some answers. Some things will maybe remain unresolved because it's complicated. It's a very complicated situation. So let's start with some geography, okay? What do we see here? Anyone else? Yes?
North Africa and the Middle East.
All right, that's right. So what we see here in green, these are states that are a member of the Arab League. And with most of them, we don't have any diplomatic relationships. Some of them we do, like Egypt, like Jordan, like Morocco. But it's kind of a tough neighborhood, and most of these countries are not supporting the idea that Israel will exist the way it is today. And Israel is so tiny, as you can see, it's just 1/6 of 1% of the entire Middle East. Despite the fact that it's so tiny, like you can see here, it's only 6 hours drive from the top to the bottom part of it, and it's 85 miles wide, like 90 minutes drive from the river of Jordan here to the coastline of Tel Aviv. And here we have the West Bank area and the Gaza Strip. The guys at the back, do you see the map? Everybody sees that? If not, feel free. Everybody can come in and sit here on the floor with me. I promise I don't bite. And 9 miles long. So we're going to see here this area, it's called the West Bank, and this is called the Gaza Strip, and we're going to talk about them furthermore, so please keep that in mind. And let's dive right in. So who are the people that lives in Israel? My friend here, John Michael, asked you. So we have about 9.6 million citizens in total. The most of them, 75% of them, are Jewish people, like me. Almost 20% of them are Muslims, and 2% are Christians, and 2% are Druze. There is one big misconception that Jews are white people from Europe, and that's not true because we are originated in the Middle East. And quite honestly, if you visit today in Israel, you'll see that 50% of the Israelis that you'll meet today are mixed of Jews that came from Arab countries, from Europe countries, and we're kind of a big, giant melting pot. With immigrants from all over the world. We have Jews from Ethiopia, from China, from the United States, from wherever. So let's go a little bit back. So how do we even get our names? Why, does anybody know why Jews are even being called Jews? Yes.
Jerusalem?
Oh, close. Yes, close. Close. I think just like one step bigger. What was the region? What was the area called?
I can't remember what the region is
Yes.
called.
Judah?
Judea. Jews get their name from Judea. Mazel tov.
Right. So about 3,000 years ago, King David and all. Thank you. Oh, you can wear it.
Yeah, you can wear it or you can just hold it with a handle. No, look like a truck driver on a CD.
It's like a dog collar.
Okay, do you hear me better now? Do you hear me better now?
Just yell.
Just yeah.
Just yell.
What do you prefer, with the microphone or without? Everybody who's for the microphone, raise their hands.
Oh, wow.
You prefer without? You prefer me without the microphone? Okay, bye.
What do you prefer? It's up to you.
Okay, so about 3,000 years ago, we had the kingdom of Judea. It got split into two, the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judea remained. The capital was always Jerusalem, and like I said, this goes back about 3,000 years ago. And Jews were named Jews because these were the people that came from Judea, that's right. That's how we got our name. And why are we being called Israel today? Anyone know? Today, and Israelites, and Israeli. Right, so we have the three patriarch fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Right? We know them? Okay, so Jacob's name was also?
Israel, right?
You are super, what's up with you guys?
We just finished this unit.
Oh, good.
Bailey's class.
Alright, so Jacob's name was also Israel. And what?
I don't remember anything from Mr. Bailey's
That's what I was invited for. And his descendants were known as the children of Israel, and that's us. Okay, so that's our name. For the first 1,000 years, as we can see here in the Jewish timeline, we had the control over this land. We've built a thriving kingdom, the kingdom of David, the kingdom of Solomon, temple number 1. But then we've been conquered, we've been colonialized, we've been kicked out. We were able to come back. That was like the first 1,000 years. And how do we know that that happened? How do we know that for sure? How do we know that we were there? Yes?
Records?
Records! What records? From 3,000 years, they didn't have emails, nobody sent emails.
Scrolls. Writing.
Writings, that's right. Yeah?
Just doing intrusion like clay tablets.
What?
Clay tablets maybe?
I can't hear.
Tablets.
Tablets?
Clay.
All right, so you see here, we have ancient coins with the ancient menorah sign, which is a distinguished Jewish sign. We have ancient writings that were found. These are artifacts that were found in Jerusalem area and dated about 3,000 years ago. And we also have the Bible that gives us indication about where these people were, like we were part of this land. So, moving forward, something really dramatic is about to happen to us. In the year 70,
Can I leave this one? This is my favorite part.
Take
Okay, I love this. I always ask to jump in on this. Okay, does anybody know about Roman history? Just a little bit. Okay, does anybody know Hadrian? Does that name ring a bell?
No.
No, I'd be surprised if anyone said no. Okay, yes, you know?
My name is Adrian.
Adrian, exactly. It's that without a H, right? Okay, so around 70 CE, Israel, Judea, is a Roman province. So the Romans have come in and they are ruling this land. You may know about this from the New Testament, right?
Yeah.
Pontius Pilate, these sort of things you're familiar with. Okay, so it's a Roman province. It's a colonial area of the Romans. Okay, wonderful. And so the Jews during this time are getting really, really upset about this Roman rule. Because of taxes, because of oppression, because of these laws that are being very restrictive of their rights of self-expression and freedom of worship and legislation governing their own affairs. Okay? And so these Jews are getting really miffed about this whole thing. And so they start revolting. They start revolting throughout the first couple centuries of the rule of the Romans, until eventually the Romans get really upset about this. And Emperor Flavian comes, marches and leads an army, Flavian Titus, sacks Jerusalem, destroys the temple, the second temple, the holiest place in Judaism, where Jews went to pray and do the sacrificial cult, destroys it, bans Jews from Jerusalem, their place of worship, to try and quell these continual uprisings of political strife. Okay? Well, the Jews still get pretty miffed about the whole thing. And they continually uprise for the next 70 years until 135 CE or AD, the next Roman emperor, Hadrian, says, all right, we've got to stop this completely and entirely. And so he decides to launch another invasion and expels Jews from the entirety of Judea, not just Jerusalem, but all of the ancient land of Israel. And so now Jews are kicked out of this homeland. And they're spread all throughout in something called the diaspora. Have we heard this term, diaspora?
The answer should be yes.
Diaspora. Can somebody tell me what diaspora is? Anybody? It's a term invented for Jews. Okay, so the Jewish diaspora is just basically Jews living outside of Israel. It was the initial expulsion in 135 CE by Emperor Hadrian, and the Jews now are moving everywhere. They move to the east, the Middle East, outside, they move across North Africa. Some are taken as slaves, brought to Italy under the Romans. Now Jews are in Europe, and they spread throughout the European continent.
All right.
That's your turn.
And last but not least, the Roman really wants to punish the Jews for their revolt and their, giving them a really hard life before they were kicked out. So what do? What do you do if you really want to punish these people after you kick them out? Want to wipe every memory that they have from this place. What do? Yes.
You might go on a rampage and kind of kill some people.
Interesting. Okay.
That's not good.
No, close, but no, okay.
Burn books.
Burn books, okay. You probably did that as well, yeah?
Destroy the city.
What?
Destroy the city and
I can't hear, I don't know what's happening.
destroy the city.
Destroy the city, that's right, yeah?
Genocide.
Genocide. Wow, you're pretty tough, guys. Okay.
We read.
Huh? We read. Okay, so what they really want to break that connection the Jewish people had to their piece of land, and what they're going to do, they're going to rename it. They're going to wipe their memory of this land. They want to wipe the memory from the books of history. So they're going to rename it, and now they're going to name it as Syria Palestina. All right, does it sound familiar, this name? Does it ring a bell, yeah?
The word Syria kind of sounds familiar because Syria is a place.
Right, and Syria is an up north of Israel, but the name Palestina is what this region is going to be named from now on for the next 2,000 years until Israel will be established in 1947. But where did they come from? Where did this name came from? Why? Okay, this name is by the ancient Philistines, not the Palestinians that live today in Israel. Philistines were ancient Greek people that lived on the coastline and gave Israelis, Jewish people, really hard time. And they were kind of known as the troublemakers of this region. Somewhere along history they disappeared, but the Romans really want to punish the Jews, so they named this land after them, and Jews have been kicked out. Well, they haven't been so successful because some Jews were able to stay, mainly in Jerusalem area and the north part of Israel, and maintain a 3,000 years connection with this land, like I told you at the beginning. So, what's life was like in the diaspora for Jews? Why don't you take a guess? Let's guess. What is life? You've been kicked out of your house, you've been spread all over the world. What is it like? Yes. Huh?
Depressing.
Depressing. Depressing. It is depressing. Yes, it was a time of repression, right? Jews were always an oppressed minority. They were never considered equal rights citizens. They were often massacred, often being accused for every illness or wrongdoing of every society. At best, they were considered second-class citizens. Sometimes they would have been marked with the Magen David, with the Star of David signs on them. As I said, it will get the worst in Europe under the Nazi regime, under Germany. And we'll talk about it later a bit. Here, what we can see here is an image from the Middle East days where Jews were being blamed for the Black Plague and therefore been burned alive. Yeah, that's something that happened quite often. Unfortunately, it will get worse and worse until it'll get to the Holocaust time. The Holocaust was the genocide of the Jews under the Nazi regime in Europe. Okay, so going back to that region, what's going on right now in this region? We are now in the 7th century. We have Islamic armies erupting from the Arab Peninsula and conquesting this entire region. The last one of these empires will be the Ottoman Empire. Have you heard about the Ottoman Empire?
Yeah.
Turkey? Yeah? Who are they?
Turkey.
Somebody yelled at there? Yeah? Turkey? Turkey. Yes, that's
They
right.
were basically this Ottoman Turk state that conquered a lot of North Africa,
Yes,
the
they were.
Arabian Peninsula, and a lot of Europe.
Yes, they were a big and strong empire. They were the Turks as we know them today, and they will take over this region in 1517 and control it for the next 400 years until they will lose it to the British people in World War I. So what did this region look like during these years? Not much to it. It was divided and conquered randomly by the interests of any conquerors that came. We had 15 different languages spoken there at the same time. There was a lot of traders, people bypassing. There were Jews, the local tribes. This place was pretty much a dump. Nobody really took the time to rebuild it or make anything out of it. And this is how it was left until the Jews will come back later on. Moving forward in our timeline, we're getting to the late 1800s. Things in Europe gradually began to be worse and worse for the Jews. Anti-Semitism is on the rise. In the early years, it's more based on religious, right? They're different from the Christians. There's a lot of, you want to talk about anti-Semitism for a minute? Because you love to.
Love to talk about it.
Let's give us like 2 minutes about anti-Semitism in Europe, and I'll pick it up from there. Yeah.
Okay, so does anybody know maybe how anti-Semitism started? Do we have any guesses? How does any prejudice start? How does any prejudice begin? Yes. You're different. You're different. Exactly it. So, Jews in the diaspora, as they're moving throughout North Africa, the Middle East, and Europe, they sort of have these different cultures and practices and this different religion, and they look different, right? They're walking in Christian Europe. They've got this dark curly hair. They speak this Semitic guttural language, right, to these Europeans. No offense to Hebrew, I love it. And they do things like they wail when they pray, they do this, and these guys are weirdos, the Europeans, okay? And as they're spreading throughout Christian Europe, they start to gain and grow in number. And like when any group goes into a majority group, with all of these differences and starts to grow, the main majority group feels threatened, especially when the minority group begins to succeed. And you see this a lot throughout history with different prejudices. And so, because the Jews have been in so many different places, we see this anti-Semitism, this prejudice of difference, kind of universalized, right? So this initially starts as a religious difference. So as they're spreading out through Christian and Muslim lands, we initially see the Christians start to not like that they share the same religion. The same thing happens with Muslims, right? And specifically, for a long time, in Christian teaching, this is no longer the case. There was this accusation that Jews were responsible for the death of Jesus. And this was perpetuated throughout the centuries. Obviously, this is false. This is a lie. This is a libel. However, this informed much of the hatred and bigotry against Jews for centuries. And so we see a religious-based anti-Semitism because of these different cultural practice, beliefs, and systems and how you view the world up until about the 1800s. And then something happens. As modernity approaches, as the Industrial Revolution is occurring, we start to see this secularization of society, and we see this shift from a religious outlook of the world into a more rational, non-faith-based, secular approach, scientific, one would say. Now, here's a question. Do you think, with this shift in society, from a more religious worldview to a more scientific worldview, all the prejudices and bigotry of the past just went away when people started to approach things rationally?
No,
No,
it's humans.
it's humans. Thank you very much. Instead, what did they do? They tried instead to scientifically prove their preconceived notions, to scientifically back all of their prejudices. And so you get racial theories of individuals who do not share the majority culture's race to start to be considered inferior, and this directly affects the Jews. So we see a shift in the late 1800s to early 1900s from this religious-based anti-Semitism that's been festering in Europe and all throughout the world for centuries to now more scientific-based anti-Semitism that applies to all racial minority groups, which is called eugenics. The idea that you can prove that certain other individuals are inferior through science. All of this is bogus. None of it's backed by science or biology. But this is sort of what drives anti-Semitism of the past 100 to 150 years. The beliefs that Jews are inferior racially. And so Zionism sort of is the Jewish response to this continual attack from main society that Jews are inferior, they do not belong in Europe. That makes sense? Any questions? Great.
So, Zionism. Zionism today is being compared very often, unfortunately, to racism, right? And it's very important to understand and have this distinguished and understand that it's not, actually. Zionism, actually the word Zion is one of the names that the land of Israel from the Bible time. And being a Zionist means that you believe that Jews have the right for self-determination, that Jews have the right as people that share the same religion, culture, language, history, just like Italians have Italy, just like French people have France, the Jewish people also have the right to have their own state. That's what the Zionism means. And now, these Zionists, these Jewish leaders, began to think together, where should we go to rebuild our home? Where should we go? Where can we be in order to protect ourselves from what's going on in the world right now? And the only natural answer to that is Israel, because this is the birthplace of Judaism and their people and their historic ancestral homeland. It couldn't be anywhere else. Okay, and they start to think and plan how would they go back. So, before we go into get into that, I want to ask you, do you think that Zionism is a European colonialist movement?
No,
Why not?
just seems like it would be.
Just like it wouldn't be. Okay, anyone else want to take a guess? Do you think it's a colonialist movement? Yes.
I don't think it necessarily is because they kind of show a history of disliking Jews. So I'm actually not sure.
Okay, good. Let's think about colonialism and what it means. Do you think that applies to this case? Well, no, and I'll tell you why not. Because the Jewish people are indigenous to this place. They didn't just came in and just took on a land that they have nothing to do with and no history and no connection to. And the second thing is, they didn't operate it on behalf of any other European power, like France or the UK. They didn't just went and search for a new place for themselves and, on behalf of some kingdom. Okay, so like I told you, this place, before the Jews came back and rebuilt it, was pretty much a dump. Mark Twain also visited, and that was the same impression that he got. This place was left to its own fate. Not a lot of infrastructure were built there. Plenty of room to settle in. Only 300,000 people in total there. Just imagine, today we have almost 10 million people living on the same land. Back then, 300,000 in total. About 20 to 25,000 out of them were Jewish people. And there's plenty of room to come in and settle in. So how do we do it? Do we just come in and say, hi, what's up? What have we missed in the last 2,000 years? Anything changes? Anything new? No. What do? We do it gradually, right? We're making aliyah. Aliyah means to come up to in Hebrew. That means whenever you go into Israel, because it's considered a holy land, you come up to it, right? If you're living it, you're coming down from it. So Aliyah means waves of immigration, and these waves of immigrations will begin in the late 1800s and will grow bigger and bigger as things get worse and worse for the Jews, and until the peak of it will be the Holocaust, right? So they go in, they buy these lands legally, they pay high prices for these lands, they buy them from absentee landowners, from local Arab tribes, and slowly they begin to build it. Most of them were secular, most of them did agricultural, mostly. And this is, for example, Tel Aviv. Anyone know Tel Aviv today? Anyone heard about Tel Aviv? Well, this is what it looks like when it was established in 1909. Just empty dunes, sands, nothing much to it. And this is Tel Aviv today, world's second Silicon Valley, right? Biggest hub for tech, innovation, one of the most liberal places in the world, thriving democracy, very fun place to visit, by the way. Great restaurants, great parties. That's a side note. Okay.
After ready. After the sixth graders.
After graduation.
After you graduate, nobody leaves the class now and fly to Israel. Okay. So, moving forward in our timeline, we're getting to 1917. World War I ends. The Ottoman Empire loses. Who wins? Britain and UK, right. And part of the territories that they gained is here in the Middle East, and they decide to divide it between themselves according to their interests. The orange part will go to the French, and the yellowish part is supposed to go to the British. Well, so in order to win this war, the British will make some promises about this piece of land to some different leaders. Some Arab leaders that help them, some Jewish leaders. And from now on, we're going to see that problem will start to arise. Okay, so in 1917, the British will also acknowledge the right of the Jewish people to come back and rebuild their Jewish state, with preserving the rights of the minorities that live there. That's called the Balfour Declaration, right? Balfour was the foreign British minister. And this declaration will be endorsed into another decision by the League of the Nations. That was an organization prior to the UN. And in 1920, they will make it legally. UK will give this to the Jordanian people, to their leader, because they promised him that. And we will be left, the Jewish people will be left with this yellow part here. And the League of the Nations will give Britain the mandate to kind of have a temporary government over this place and kind of prepare it for the next stage, which will be this Jewish state that we're talking about. Well, seems very simple, right? Very easy. What can go wrong? Well, in 1921, things get to be a little bit more complicated. The British will appoint this man, Hajj Amin al-Husseini, to be the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. That means the Muslim highest leader of this area. And this man is a supreme racist. He will incite to violence. He doesn't like the fact that Jews are coming in, and he believes that resisting that forcefully is the solution to it. And he will be organizing the first uprising against Jewish community, and Jewish community will fight back. And from now on, we're going to see the spring of the conflict that is actually here with us until today. He is considered the father of the modern Palestinian nationalism. Later on, he'll also join forces with Hitler. We all know who Hitler is, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, yeah, that's right. And Hitler will support him too, going against the British. And this is an appointment that the British made and will make a lot of problems later on. So, like I said, things are getting rough. We're now in the 20s and in the 30s. And in 1937, the British say, okay, what's going on here? Everybody's fighting with each other. They're also fighting against the British, trying to keep them out and getting their own independency. And so the British put together the Peel Commission in 1937. And they're thinking, oh my God, what should we do? How should we handle this mess that's going around here? And they decide to have a sort of partition plan, right? We're going to give this red area here to the Arabs. We're going to give this blue part here to the Jews. And we're going to leave this yellow corridor under international supervision. right? The Jews, we're not happy. That's not what we've been promised, right? But we're willing to negotiate about it. Unfortunately, the Arab leaders says no. And with that, we're going to also see another trend starting that's called like the Arab rejectionism. Repeatedly saying no to any solutions, any offers, peace offers, or petition plans. They want the entire land for themselves and no compromising. Unfortunately, that pressure will also be put onto the British, and the British will close the gate of immigration in the late 30s and beginning of 40s, just at the time that the Jews needed the most. Because, let me remind you, during these years, we begin to see the process that will build up towards the Holocaust, the genocide of the Jews. Jews first being marked as Jews, having to go with the Star of David, being pushed away from their livelihood is being destroyed. Have you heard about the Crystal Night? The night where they shattered glasses and stores of Jewish people. Later on, they've been put into ghettos. Have you heard the term ghettos?
Yeah.
Living under terrible conditions, very crowded, lots of disease. And whoever suffered that hunger and disease and cold and terrible condition were sent to the gas chambers, to the concentration camps. Have you heard about the concentration camps? Yes, and in the concentration camps, they have to work really hard, and whoever survived that gets sent to the gas chambers. 6 million Jews were massacred during this time, not only by these means, but also by often massacred. Let's not go into the terrible ways that it has been done. Yes, and I'd like to tell you on that opportunity that my great-grandmother actually survived Auschwitz, which was one of the most terrible and notorious concentration camps, and was able to get to Israel and live to the age of 93. She haven't talked with us much about it because it's a very hard topic to tell. Many of the survivors felt ashamed, felt very traumatized by what they've gone through, and were not able to talk for most of their lives. Some were able to. My other stepmother was just a baby during these years, and her mother and her were about to be sent to Auschwitz. They were standing on the train lines, waiting to go on these trains, when one Nazi soldier noticed her and the baby that she was holding, and told her, "I'm going to look away now. And when I look away, it's your chance to run. If not, you will die." And that's what she did. She just jumped off the ramp with the baby in her hand and ran to a convent and stayed there until the end of the war. And were able to go to Israel as well and build a family. So this was not the case for other 6 million Jews, 1.5 million kids out of them. And during these terrible years, what happens here is that Britain's closing the gate and do not allow Jews to come in on the boats and flee from what's the catastrophe that's going on in Europe. And that brings us to 1945. The war ends, and we're almost getting close to the time that Israel was established. But I want to take the pause here and ask you, do you think that Israel took over a country that was once called Palestine? Let's think about it. In light of everything you know and everything we told you, what do you think? Anyone think yes? Raise their hands. Anyone? One? You raising your hand? Oh, just projection. Okay. Anyone think no? Raise your hands. Higher. I can't see. Can't see. Okay. Anyone who's not sure, raise your hands. All right. Thank you. The answer is no. Why not? Why not? Yes.
Because it was Israel's country.
It was always in the first place. That's why the Palestinians and Arabs were sitting there all these years too, right? So the simple fact is that it was never a state called Palestine. It was the name of the region, like I told you. The Roman gave this region its name, and it lasted for the next 2,000 years. All the inhabitants of this place were known as Palestinians. The Jew from Palestina, the Arab from Palestina. If you want to insult a Jew in Europe during these days, you'll tell him, go back to Palestina where you belong. Because everybody knew these were the same place that Jews came from. And like we said, there was no one united nationality. 50 different languages were spoken there. Not one identity, not ever as a state. The besides the ancient time where the Jewish state existed. Okay, 1947, 2 years post the war, the newly born organization of the UN gives us another resolution, Resolution 141, the partition plan. What are they offering? The blue part will go to, the red part will go to, yellow will be, oh my God, you read so well. What do you think about this offer? Fair, yes, take it, live it.
No.
No, why not?
Because it's
Is
their
that
land.
in your town?
Whose land?
The Jews.
The Jews. But there are Arabs there, yes.
Is there a little red dot next to it? Or no?
Oh, there is. Yes.
That's kind of dumb. Why would they split it up?
That's mark. No, that marks Tel Aviv. There is no partition there. It's just on the map. Okay. It's not the best. We don't get to sit in our ancestral area. We don't get to have Jerusalem to ourselves. Most of this area is desert, pretty much. Let me tell you, it's not a good one. But we're willing to take it because we have no other option. We really understand we have no other option, right? But the Arab leader says no to this plan, and from that day on, for the next 6 months, we'll go into a stage of a civil war between the Jews and the local Arab community. This war would last until May 48. What will happen in May 48?
The British come back.
The Jews win. Just win. So simple. No, on May 48, what happens is that the UK is ending their mandate. They say, okay guys, that's it, we're out of here. They're onto their ships, they're sailing back to the UK, and Israel is announcing its independence. This is our first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, and this is Herzl, the father of Zionism. You see his picture there, because he didn't get to see his dream come true. He died a few years before Israel was established. And we're declaring this exciting day. And during this declaration, we give the Declaration of Independence. Can anyone help me with reading this here, this orange part? Who can help me? Yes.
It will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all of its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex.
What does it mean? Yes.
That everyone is equal in a way.
That's right. This is going to be a Jewish state for the Jewish people, a democracy, and it's also going to give equal rights to all its inhabitants, no matter what's their age, sex, religion. All right? This is something that is very important to us, even in the midst of what's going on in the war and the conflict. We're still making sure to preserve the rights of all minorities, and we're still doing it till today. To remind you, we have over 20% of minorities living today in Israel, right? But this civil war will become an international war. When on that day, when we declare our independence, we're declared war upon us. And we have 5 different armies invading us. Egypt, Jordan, what? Sorry, okay. Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, all at once. Just to remind you, we're a few hours old. Some miraculous way, we're able to push them back, and these are the borders that we are left with. This war is also known as the War of Independence, created another crisis. That crisis is the refugee crisis. Have you heard about the refugee crisis? Yeah. What do you know about it? Okay, I'll tell you because time is running out and I want to leave time for questions. We really hear a lot about the Palestinian refugees, and I'll get to it in a minute, but we don't get to hear about the Jewish refugees. And I want you to know that we had between 800 and 900,000 refugees that were expelled from their Arab countries once this war was declared. And they were kicked out, and they have to walk sometime by foot. And the only place they could go to is Israel. But why don't we hear about them? Because Israel serves its purpose and absorbed them as citizens. It wasn't easy. We do get to hear a lot about the Palestinian refugees. We're talking about 600 to 700,000 in total that ran away from Israel and spread around in West Bank, in Gaza, in Syria, in Lebanon. Why did they run away? Well, there are a few explanations to that. First, it was a war zone. It was a scary time. There was a lot of rumors running around. People were afraid for their lives, so they ran away. Some Arab leaders also promised them, you can run away and you can come back once we wipe off these Jewish people out of here. We're going to kick them out. You can come back. And some we had to evacuate for strategical reasons. It's a war, to remind you, it was an existential war for us. And what happens today is that the UN has a special agency called UNRWA, and this agency was supposed to take care of this refugee crisis and make sure they will be observed. But they gave them the status of refugees not only to them, but also to their descendants. So now we're talking third, fourth generation under this title. And this title means that the country that hosts them do not have to give them citizenships. So they're kind of stuck in between. They have nowhere to go back to. Some of them still hold the keys to their old houses. On the other hand, they are not equal rights citizens where they are, and it's a terrible humanitarian crisis. There is no other way to put it. We're talking today about 5 million refugees in total, and that is a situation that we have to understand and acknowledge. So post-war, we left with its borders. Jordan is sitting here on the West Bank and controlling most of Jerusalem, do not allow Jews to go and pray in their holy sites. Strategically, West Bank area is a mountainous area. They're overlooking our coastline. This is not by any means not optimized for us. Moving fast to 67, on the eve of June 4th, we see troops gathering around our borders, and we understand the things about to happen. Okay, the first strike is when Egypt is sending the UN peacekeepers back to their homes and blocking the Suez Canal here in the south in the Red Sea, and that's an act of war. And when that happens, we decide to initiate a preemptive move, and we strike the Egyptian Air Force. We can give them a knockout, and then continue to fight in other fronts and end this war within only
6 days.
6 days. That was also kind of a miracle. And not only that, we also ended up with more territories than we had before. We had the West Bank, we had the Golan Heights from Syria, we had Gaza Strip, and Sinai from Egypt. And we're like, whoa, whoa. We're willing to go and negotiate immediately. Okay, we're willing to give back these territories in exchange of peace agreements. What do we get?
Deny.
No. The 3 no's. No peace with Israel, no recognition of Israel, and no negotiation with Israel. And that led us to 73. We had another war, Yom Kippur War. On our holiest day, we were attacked. This war almost wiped us off the map. A lot of casualties on both sides. But Egypt was able to kind of regain this kind of respect back. And that set the stage in 79 to a first peace agreement with Egypt. The first time that Egyptian leader, then an Arab leader, landed in Israel. This brave man, Anwar Sadat, made this agreement with our Prime Minister Begin, and later on was assassinated, unfortunately, for that bold move. In 1994, we have another peace agreement with Jordan. This is our then Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, that also a year later was assassinated. Huh? 8 more minutes. Okay, let's run really fast. Another attempt to make a peace agreement with Yasser Arafat, the head of the PLO. It didn't bear fruit, and that led us to the most notorious times in Israel, the years 2000, and between 2000 and 2005, we have the second Intifada, the deadliest terror wave that Israel has ever known. Buses were exploding, restaurants would explode, shopping centers would explode. I myself was at a shopping center once and left it a few minutes just before the attack happened, and it's very close, it's very near, it's very surrounded, you're very surrounded by this. I was about your age when I was during these years. And we have an average of 12 attacks per day. Over 1,000 Israelis died, innocent civilians died, thousands were injured, and this was very, very bloody and painful years for us. That leads Israel to do two major things. Build a wall surrounding the West Bank in order to prevent these terrorists to come in and walk into Israel and just commit these suicide attacks. The second thing is checkpoints, right? So when we're flying today, what do we do after we check in? Security check, that's right. So the world of post 9/11, we are all familiar with that procedure. That is something that Israel has been put into place in 2002. And we are having these checkpoints at certain places. We know that it's making Palestinian life a bit harder because it's harder for them to move around freely. They have to stand in line. It's not a nice and easy procedure, but this was something that was proven effective, and even terror organizations like Hamas admitted that they could not carry out anymore these terror attacks. In the year 2000, we make another peace offer. We want to give back 100% of Gaza, 97% of the West Bank. We are willing to share Jerusalem as a capital, but we've been rejected. And give 3 billion international funds for the refugees. In 2008, we make even more generous offer, adding to that 5,000 refugees that will be allowed to go back. We are being denied. Again, it's not been fruitful. This process has been rejected. In the year 2005, Israel decides to do one-sided move and withdraw from Gaza. We evacuated that. We withdraw our army from inside of Gaza, and we are evacuating and uprooting almost 9,000 Israelis from their houses these years. This was very painful, one-sided move. We hope that by doing that, the other side will come to an agreement with us, a peace agreement. But unfortunately, in 2006, Hamas is a terror organization, takes over in a democratic election in the Gaza Strip in 2007. They're committing a coup and taking over control of the entire strip. And ever since then, they're engaging in very deadly terrorist activity, firing missiles at Israel. Just last night, we had fires of tens of rockets, I believe, on Israeli settlements surrounding this area. We have few rounds of conflict ever since then, as you can see here, 2008, 2012. They're also building tunnels and storing ammunition underground. Also, these tunnels are supposed to be used as ways to kidnap Israeli citizens. And indeed, they succeeded in doing that and kidnapped one Israeli soldier, Gilad Shalit. I don't know if you heard that name a few years back. So this is what it looks like today. These are these checkpoints that we talked about. This is the security barrier. And unfortunately, we also see a lot of riots surrounding the borders, a lot of provoking, a lot of trying to clash with soldiers in order to get strong images of Israeli soldiers hurting them. But unfortunately, I mean, this is what terror organizations do. A lot of the time, they're operating from civilian places. They're shooting their missiles from schools, from hospitals, using innocent people as their shields, because they know that Israel will want to defend itself and will want to go after these missile launchers and eliminate them. And they just don't care about their people that much. They don't care about innocent people's life. We have few more waves of violence during these years. I have like about 3 minutes. So after we said that they kind of, couldn't execute any more of the suicide attacks, not so many as they wanted, there came a new wave of terror that's called the stabbing intifada. And here, because they couldn't smuggle in bombs, they would just cross the borders, buy some weapons like knives, like axes, go to the supermarket, go to local centers, and just kill people with that. That's also a very terrifying time where you don't know where to look behind your back, who could do it. It's really everywhere. And unfortunately, this lasts until today. But not all bad news. We also had a few peace agreements back in 2020 with United Arab Emirates, Sudan, Morocco, Bahrain. And today, Israelis go and find a vacation in Dubai, something that was a far dream, like 5 years ago. Nobody would believe that would happen, and here we are. So we're very optimistic towards the future. Also today in Israel, you can enjoy fully religious freedom. Everybody is, like we said, equal, can practice their own religion, practice their own life, way of life. LGBTQ rights are being also preserved, and it's a very liberal place. The interesting thing about Israel is that it was able to take their challenges and turn them into opportunities. A lot of the tech innovations that we know of today, like Instant Key, like texting, like Waze, they were all invented in Israel. A lot of biotech technology, a lot of medical innovations are also coming from Israel. And the last but not least, the one thing that I really like to talk about is humanitarian aid. We have special divisions in the IDF that are willing and practicing and were able to harness the knowledge that they have with dealing with trauma and terror situation and provide help and relief and life-saving support in places where there is tsunami, when there is an earthquake. We're first to be there on the ground and to help save lives, even when Katrina hit the U.S., and different places around the world, like the earthquake that just happened in Turkey. Sometimes we do also serve humanitarian aid to people that we don't have diplomatic relationships with, right? Syria, right? So this is something that you don't get to hear a lot about Israel, but just so you know, there's a lot of people that are doing that too, the IDF and also other organizations. I have a short video, but
2 minutes.
I don't know if it will play. So, okay, I'll give you time for questions if you want. We have 2 minutes, maybe 1 or 2 questions. Let's try. Nothing. Yeah, well, we unpacked a lot. I know. Okay. All right, guys. So, I'm going to leave you. I'm going to give you 1 minute to breathe before you're going outside. I want to wish you a wonderful week. Thank you so much for staying with us and learning. See you soon.